should be. Well, welcome, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. I think we're mostly interested in getting back to chatting and drinking, so let me let me get through this. When I was asked to do this, I was initially somewhat uncomfortable with the idea, and then I realized, no, this is important because these successes that I'm going to discuss before I talk about where I'm going, they're not my personal successes. This is the successes of this really incredible organization that is built with just consummate professionals and really passionate people. And I hope this helps you think again, possibly, or for the first time, about how important your investment has been over these years in this institution. Because I can say, without these incredible people, we really would not have gotten anywhere. And that's everyone from volunteers to staff to board and donors. So thank you. Well, 3 years, it has gone rather quickly, and I do owe, well, my clicker's not working immediately, so that's great. So I do owe, again, all of these successes to these incredible people and many, many more. But what has happened over these years that I would classify as successes? When I was thinking about this and talking with a few folks, there's some fairly mundane things that actually were incredibly heavy lifts for the staff that I wanted to share with you, because they don't seem like much, but I promise the human hours that went into them were pretty extraordinary. When I got here, we started immediately by overhauling the HR benefit system. We went from paper timesheets to single option healthcare to a modern system with a whole technology interface that's brand new. We digitized all of our land archives. Can you imagine how many archives SCCF had on land? It was fairly extraordinary. There were cabinet upon cabinet, and we had 200 strap numbers when I got here, and we've combined many and created fewer, so it really has been a harrowing experience digitizing land archives. And I want to thank, well, Luke, your son, where are we? There you are, who helped us do that. It was an incredible intern who helped us get through all of those archives, so thank you. We also redesigned the finance and board reporting system, I don't know, 3 or 4 times just for fun, so that seemed like a great use of everyone's time. And then, no, it really was successful. And then we switched from paper to digital donor records. Again, all of these things are incredibly mundane, but I have to tell you, because of the amount of energy that went into them. Nope, wrong way. So programmatic changes. Some of these are fairly significant and required quite a bit of buy-in from many people here in this room. But one of the first things was the creation of a coastal wildlife department. I don't think there are many places on the planet where sea turtles and shorebirds play more of an important role in day-to-day culture and society than Sanibel and Captiva. Can you imagine how often you talk about sea turtles and compare that with other coastal communities in the world? I think it really is something that's incredibly special. And so we needed the coastal wildlife team to have their own control of their program and really decide how to go forward with that in the future. And that has been hugely successful. And as you all know, sea turtles continue to be a hugely important part of SCCF's existence, along with a million other fun things. So the combination with the Sanibel Sea School, when you read it in one line, it really falls fairly flat. But I can assure you, this was the activity of my time here. That was such an incredible undertaking with so many people requiring so many hours from legal to accounting to HR, and it really has been such an incredible addition to the SCCF family. It's made us an even richer organization. The expansion of the Environmental Policy Department. We've hired a PhD-level hydrological modeler. Let me say this, and just in case you haven't watched this personally, which I imagine most of you haven't for your own sanity, the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, the LOSM process, is still unfolding, but has gotten to a fairly stable place that is rather positive for the west coast of Florida. Yes. And while we're there, I'll just say 2 things, and I'll finish this thought in a second. But 2 people in this room deserve your round of applause for playing an absolutely incredible role in making that happen for the West Coast. 1 is Mayor Holly Smith, and 2 is James Evans, so they deserve it. The hydrological model, or why this was so important. For years and years, SCCF and everyone on the West Coast was required, effectively, to receive modeling and hope for the best. We didn't have any way to ground truth it. Well, this changed everything. We hired a full-time person, Paul Julian, who has his PhD from the University of Florida, who was with the Florida DEP for many years. He was able to take everything that the Army Corps was giving, everything that South Florida Water Management District was giving, everything that partners on the East Coast were giving, and completely go through it line by line and make sure that it was best for us. We ended up in a place that we estimate to be about 30% better than what we currently have. And I'm very comfortable saying that without Paul's input, I'm not confident we would have arrived there, because we had such incredible science and ground truth, and then people to deliver it like those in here, and so many of you here in the room. Additionally, through another partnership, and we'll talk about the partnerships that brought us here, we were able to bring on a PhD level resilience manager with climate, to start talking about climate and sea level rise. When I was interviewing for this job, I was told that we don't really always talk about climate because it's politically uncomfortable, and that was from the beginning, and I said, well, I'm probably not the right person if you don't want me to talk about science, right? And what is incredible, though, and what I really think our entire state and region deserves a real, we should all breathe a sigh of relief. It's a politically waning argument against talking about climate change. People are embracing it of all political stripes, and I think that is so critical, and it really is a turning point that I have seen since I've been here, that it's no longer a particularly partisan issue. How you go about it is a partisan issue, as everything is. However, talking about it and engaging, I think it's really refreshing for me to see that people from all walks of the political spectrum are engaging on it. So that's an important change, and I think having Carrie here, who's in the room, if you haven't met her, is going to be a really great addition to resilience conversations here on the island. And also the creation of a single educational structure with a senior director overseeing both C-school and adult education. So hiring a senior director with a doctorate in education to oversee that, and Mason Goss is a new hire to SCCF. But I think it'll be important because when we added the C-school, we had a whole new ability. We were able to educate hundreds and thousands of children every year, and that was new to us. We never did it at that scale. So now we have a central group of people, Jenny and Shannon and Mason, who are thinking about education as a unit for the entire institution, and that, I think, is going to be incredible. And I want to say this is not exhaustive, and if you're in this room and you're saying, Ryan, you forgot X, please forgive me. This is, believe it or not, really hard when you don't take many notes to come up with these things. So the successes in our new partnerships and sometimes renewing of partnerships. The Florida Gulf Coast University, while I was here, we signed an MOU with the Water School to help facilitate grant funding and a variety of other research activities across the region. And the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, this one is how we paid for the hydrological modeler that we discussed. If it weren't for this partnership, we would have done this alone, and we thought it would be so much more powerful to be a single voice for the West Coast. And so we partnered with the Conservancy. We signed a formal MOU, one memorandum of understanding, and created a lasting partnership that I think will pay dividends for the West Coast of Florida. With the Shell Museum, we actually have several arms to this partnership, one being a joint, it's not a secret, right, Sam? I think you're there. Sorry, as I'm saying it, I'm hoping it's not a secret. A joint, the Shell Museum is hosting an exhibition on red tide, on harmful algal blooms, that SCCF is participating in it, and that has been a really important, and I think will be an important exhibit for you all to see. But also we co-hired a facilities coordinator, which, you know, I think should be a model for this island, these islands. When you can't afford to go at it alone, so what? Do it with someone else. And I think that when I got here, that sort of collaboration was not always the case. The Captiva Erosion Prevention District, they're funding our coastal resilience manager, part of Carrie's salary. Another really important long-term partnership that makes sense. And the Gulf Coast Hope Spot, I didn't want to leave that off. We are an official partner in the Gulf Coast Hope Spot that Sylvia Earle's group, Mission Blue, names these hotspots around the world, and annually we give updates and participate in data. And this has been a really important partnership as well.
Ryan?
Yes? Oh, that's absolutely crazy. Thank you for stopping me. The Center for Coastal Solutions with the University of Florida. This is an incredibly exciting partnership because what this memorandum of understanding has established is a way for collaborative research between Sanibel and Captiva, between SCCF specifically, we're their first strategic partner, and the Center for Coastal Solutions at the University of Florida. The University of Florida is able to use artificial intelligence and a supercomputer to run models and create what could be eventually one of the most studied parts of the world. The number of data inputs and the synthesis that will occur because of this partnership and because of how they're using our data and how we're collaborating really is something that I think you all should be very proud of as supporters of this organization, because I do think this is something that we're all going to look back on and continue to be incredibly impressed with. So I'll run through this a bit quickly here, but I'm really proud of this. When I first came to conservation in my life, it was because I was sad to see how quickly Florida was being developed. That had always been incredibly difficult for me to watch. The land where when I was young, and I grew up in Englewood, Florida, on River Road, if you've ever been, on both sides, used to be completely wild. And I've seen 2 panthers there growing up. And I remember as I started to develop parcel after parcel, I started to realize, wait a minute, where the heck are these panthers going to live? And I think it sort of clicked for me. And so the fact that I was able to play any role whatsoever in the acquisition of lands in Florida and permanently protecting them has been one of the more rewarding childhood dreams of my life. The acquisition of the Puchel Preserve, 12 acres right here on Sanibel, not far down the road, critical wetlands, you all made that possible. This community is incredibly generous. The Gretchen Valade Preserve down on the west end, a recent acquisition. The acquisition of the Standback Preserve, 10 new acres off of Dixie Beach, combining it with another parcel we own for 25 total acres. The acquisition of 1 acre of beachfront preserve on Upper Captiva. That is incredibly important. As you may be aware, Upper Captiva is seeing, and North Cap is seeing an explosion of development. And so anything that we can protect on the beachfront really is incredible, and this was a gift that we negotiated. The acquisition of 44 acres of Caloosahatchee front mangroves and Cape Coral. This is right at the mouth of the Caloosahatchee. It's prime sawtooth sawfish habitat. It is really just an incredible addition, and probably ornate diamondback terrapin, but I'm not sure, and Chris probably wouldn't want me to say that anyway as I say it, Chris. I'm sorry. Acquisition of 25 acres of mangrove swamp near the toll booth. You know, you see all those for sale signs. They're soon going to be transformed into SCCF preserve signs, so that is exciting. And lastly, the combination of over 100 parcels, as I mentioned before. So here's what's incredible about parcels. You have to go in line by line, and when you own hundreds and hundreds, you can imagine how long that takes our staff to go in and reaffirm that we're still using it for conservation every year. So I've cut their job in half. Great. So successes, you know, COVID-19 has been 2 years of my tenure here. I think I can't not talk about it. I think what I'm most proud of, and this is because of board leadership as well, that we had no permanent staff laid off because of COVID in the beginning. And we run an education group within our organization. That was not easy or straightforward. The C-School really suffered because of COVID. But also because of our precautions, there were no staff outbreaks resulting in the closure of an office, which is when you have 40 staff plus interns and you also have so many different office buildings, I think that's a feat and really says how diligent our staff were. And the Sanibel C-School, again, because of the precautions, never had to close or had a confirmed case that resulted in the closure or cancellation. We did close in the beginning of the pandemic as everyone else did, but not because of a breakout. So I'm incredibly proud of this. It's a sad time when we celebrate these sorts of things, but I figure this is, if that's not a success, what is? So the other things I want to draw your attention to and kind of announce, if you haven't heard, it's already been announced, but the McCarthy Lecture, you'll remember hopefully that every year we have on around February 6th a McCarthy Lecture in honor of Paul McCarthy, who started the Captiva Cruises. The Bowler family has made this possible. But we have had Dr. Sylvia Earle, who is the most prominent ocean conservationist on the planet, Dr. Kathy Sullivan, who is the head of NASA and head of NOAA, rather, and an astronaut. And then this year we're going to have Dr. Robert Ballard, and Bob Ballard discovered the Titanic, and you really should consider attending because he's a really dynamic speaker and just a world-class both scientist and conservationist. So I'm incredibly proud of these lectures. Kathy Sullivan, Sylvia Earle is one of my favorite people on the planet, and the fact that I get to interact with her because of this really is something that I'll remember fondly forever. But Kathy Sullivan's talk stands out to me as one of the most incredible 45 minutes that I've experienced in a long time. It really was extraordinary. I'm sorry we couldn't film it. So what's next for SCCF? Let me start by saying it's not really any of my business. However, I want to share a few things because I care deeply and I intend to be a donor for life because I love this place. But strengthening our partnerships. I think these partnerships we've created really are game changers, and I really think strengthening those is important. But I want to reassure you as well, because we do so much important regional work, that Sanibel and Captiva have always come first, and I believe will always come first. We might do work regionally, but we don't do it for the sake of being regional. We do it for the sake of protecting Sanibel and Captiva through our regional efforts. We've spent so many years protecting this incredible paradise. And if we weren't to turn our attention to water quality and climate change and other external factors, honestly, what has it all been for, is how I've seen this, and I believe James does as well. And I just want to say, just in case the 47 times I've mentioned this hasn't been obvious enough, I don't believe anyone better exists for this position. I think James is going to be an extraordinary CEO of SCCF. He knows more about this place than anyone I know, and certainly has more passion, so I think you all are in incredibly good hands. And I do think, though, this is something I want to remind you all because I need your help, and Sanibel needs your, and Captiva needs your help here. The future is the past, and I think what I mean by that is that new Sanibel residents and new Captiva residents, there are so many right now because of the influx, because of the real estate market. They need to be indoctrinated, and I'm using the word indoctrinated intentionally, okay? They need to be indoctrinated, and we need to do a better job of reminding everyone why Sanibel is exceptional and why this way of life and values are worth saving. Because all it takes, and this is not what we have now by any stretch of the imagination, but all it takes is one council who decides to turn a corner. And it's so incredibly important to remain vigilant and tell the story of why the Sanibel Plan matters and why we have such a strict land code, and really bring people along. And I need everyone here to be that ambassador to new people and talk about it, because I think in recent polling, fewer than 20% of families in the United States speak about climate change at home, and that poll's a few years old now, actually. And while we're not talking about climate necessarily, we're talking about the environment. And so by not talking about an idea is a certain way to shelf an idea. And I think it's really important that you keep this conversation alive. And we're so lucky to have 5 elected officials here who are very much on board and understand this. But again, that can change with one election. So what's next for me? I was asked to talk a little bit about what I'm going to do, and I don't want to spend too much time here. Well, actually, before I talk about me, give the staff a round of applause, because this was so much work for all the staff and volunteers you see here. I'm incredibly proud of their efforts here, so thank you. Everyone's leaving. So what's next for me? Well, if you're not interested, we could have talked about it. So I am going on to be the global director of a new transparency and international fisheries project. When I was asked to do this, my first thought was, this is an incredibly daunting thing that I'm being asked to do, and how could I feasibly do it? Well, the good news is it's funded by two very serious organizations who have lots of power and lots of history in this space. So it made me feel more comfortable. This is way too small for you to see, but Oceans 5, in case, the Pew Charitable Trust, almost everyone knows from their polling. That's technically separate from the trust. It's the Polling Research Center, but it's the same CEO. But the Oceans 5 is made up of some of the largest ocean funders in the world. And they include the Paul Allen Foundation, who you might know to be the co-founder of Microsoft. And so it's incredibly important. So let me explain. I was saying just the other day to Alicia, my wife, I said, wouldn't it be nice if I could just say, you know, I'm a radiologist, I'm going to work at this hospital, and then everyone understands what I do. Instead, it requires quite a bit of build-up. So let me try my best here. So the globe is, and that's the Pacific Ocean in the middle. This is a kind of a disconcerting map for some. So the world is divvied up into what are called regional fisheries management organizations. In the 1970s, largely, the UN and then additional treaties led to the creation of these RFMOs. And I'm going to use RFMO a lot because you can tell that's a long word. So the tuna RFMOs, which are the largest, are here on the bottom. They're the Commission for Bluefin Tuna in the southern part of the map there. You'll see IATTC, which is the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission, ICAT, which is the Atlantic, IOTC, the Indian Ocean, and WCPFC, which is the Pacific. There are 17 total RFMOs. The tuna are the largest and most important. So what does this mean? Well, there's no need for you to read what they're all, explain it to you, but these are just three. This is the Pacific, the Inter-American, and the Indian, and the Southern Ocean. These are all the members who are part of this. This really is a global enterprise. So it doesn't mean you have to geographically be part of an ocean basin to be a member. In fact, China, Taiwan, the United States, the European Union, and others all have what are called distant water fleets. So they fish in all oceans. China is a member in almost all of these. China and Taiwan account for the largest share of distant water fleets. The United States and the European Union, I think most people are generally surprised to know that the European Union is the world's largest exporter of shark fins because of Spain. So the European Union is a force in international fisheries. So I'm not talking about recreational fisheries. I'm not talking about small-scale fisheries. These are not artisanal. This is an industrial complex. This is industrial fisheries on a scale that when you get to see this in person really is alarming. If you see, this is probably a 60-foot boat here, and that purse seines get much larger than that. So this large purse seine will effectively scoop up everything it can. So from tuna species to dolphins and turtles, and ideally some of those will escape, but not always, and I'll explain how that happens after. But what you see here on the bottom is called a fish aggregating device, or a FAD. So you'll all remember from, well, 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were dolphin-safe tuna came out, right? That was a big thing. Well, that was because instead of using FADs, and this is artificial, so boats will go drop these around the ocean and leave them, the Mexican fleet, which was the country that was responsible for using dolphins, would set their nets by following dolphins. So dolphins, you could always see dolphins on the surface, and then the tuna would be below the dolphins. So dolphins would be caught in that. So because dolphins were dying, no one likes to see a dolphin die, obviously. That became an international issue. So the scale of these fisheries and what dies in the process really is part of this larger problem. Well, all of you, whether or not you buy this, you see it in the grocery store, every day interact with an RFMO. Because every time you see a tuna species being caught, it is likely not coming from national waters of the United States, it is coming from outside of that, and therefore caught within the laws, the regulations of an RFMO. Well, part of the issue here that is somewhat tied to what I'm working on, but an important piece, is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or pirate fishing is another way to call this. Here's what's alarming about this. Globally, and this includes the United States, because we import 85% of our marine wildlife, seafood, into the United States. So we export a lot of what we catch because it fetches a much higher value in Japan, especially, because it's such high quality that the Japanese will pay twice as much as the American market for our seafood. So we actually catch quite a bit more than that. We just happen to send it off for better prices. But globally, every time you buy marine wildlife at a restaurant, so marine wildlife is anything that comes from the ocean that is wild, at a restaurant or a store, there's a 1 in 5 chance that that animal was caught outside of laws, so outside of regulations, so illegally. What that means is it translates to 26 million metric tons of fish annually, or $23.5 billion lost to mostly developing nations, but also to the United States and other countries like the United States. That equates to more than 1,800 pounds of wild-caught fish stolen from the oceans every second. It's an alarming stat. A lot of this is happening because of the lack of enforcement, and I'll talk about that. And just another piece of this puzzle that complicates it is mislabeling, and I'll just point out, it's too small to read it back there. But in a study undertaken by Oceana, which used fish genetics, 38% of fish sampled in South Florida was mislabeled. That's an extraordinary number. If you think about it, though, the fact that we say fish or fish tacos, what does that mean? You would never order mammal tacos, right? It is an incredibly broad and absurd thing once you start thinking about it. That's why you should always look for the species identified when you are ordering. But if you look here, and this is from the most commonly mislabeled seafood, swordfish is often mako shark, bluefin tuna can be a wide variety of other tunas. And Chilean sea bass, which is a marketing name, just so you know, right? It's the Patagonian toothfish is what it was originally called, but no one wants to order a toothfish. White bass, striped bass, shark meat often is Nile perch, which is very sustainable, so in some ways that's better. Sea bass, deep water. Anyway, so the mislabeling problem is part of this, and I'm just giving you little pieces of this puzzle and so I can tie it back together for you. But if you look, Oceana, the same study, 44% of seafood in Canada was found to be mislabeled. Those are really unacceptable in any other industry. I don't think anyone would accept that in diamonds. Could you imagine if there was that level of cheating and lying in diamonds? And most of this is not the grocery store that's committing this. This is happening much further back, right? This is happening at the wholesaler. This is also happening at the dock. Part of it is we're only inspecting a tiny portion of what comes into our ports. We just don't have the human power to pull it off. No one does. No country. It's not just a US issue. So if you want to make better choices, which I'm sure most of us do, let me pause before I explain that. If you're buying something hyper-local that you know is coming from Florida, that you know is a local fish, that is a permitted fish, that is absolutely your best choice. If it's within the United States, if it is caught in our local waters, if it is on the permitted list, the state produces a permitted list of what you can, that is your best option. However, when you're traveling, when you're going to a chain restaurant, or when you're going to a restaurant period, and this folds up, this is a PDF that folds up that you can put into your wallet, or you can have the app. It's called Seafood Watch. It's put out by the Monterey Bay Aquarium. They give you best choice, good alternative, and avoid. This is as close as we can get to something that I believe is helpful for the consumer. So this is something to check out if you do enjoy seafood. Again, this is not going to be hyper-specific for Southwest Florida, so if you know something is coming from our very local waters, you are more than likely getting exactly what you expect to get. But again, about 80 to 85% of our food is derived from elsewhere. So what needs to happen? And this is fairly wonky stuff, but I'm gonna try to explain what my job will do for you. So we have to depoliticize the management of targeted species through a shift to a more transparent, science-based, and automated approach to quota setting. Here's what's crazy. Stock assessments are scientific. That means you go in, you figure out exactly how many fish are in a spot. how much that population of fish can sustain before it disappears, right? Because the idea is you want to fish the fish for many years. You don't want them to disappear in one shot. It is bizarrely qualitative. So much of this remains just a good old boys club where countries will sit in the back and play chess with the world. Rather than, we have a scientific output, we know what we can take, shut up and do that. That's where we need to get. And that sounds simple, and we've made a lot, my colleagues in this field have made a lot of headway, but there's a lot of work left to do. But you have to increase accountability by adopting measures to improve compliance. What does that mean? Right now, in most of these RFMOs, if you don't comply, there's nothing that happens to you. We turn a blind eye, whereas they should be kicked out of the market until they get their act together. 3, we need more oversight of fishing activities. Here's what's incredible in this hyper-technology-focused world. We have all of the satellites and all of the equipment that we need, and we're working with navies across the world and coast guards to do just this. Every ship is equipped with AIS already. They have to be if they're fishing in the RFMOs. Sometimes it's turned off, and that's one form of tracking. There's VMS and others. We also have to secure protections for vulnerable non-target species. So non-target species, I talked about this in the beginning. When you're long line fishing, now long lining is considered to be one of the more egregious forms of fishing, because you can have, at times, a 5-mile long line. It's usually a braided cable with thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of hooks, and literally it catches anything that bites it. So you pull in long lines. For instance, there's a certified, meaning considered to be a somewhat sustainable swordfish fishery off of Nova Scotia. In one study, for every swordfish they caught, they hooked 5 blue sharks. So what happens is you get sea turtles and seals and all sorts of other creatures. So the problem here is these non-target populations are really suffering, and it's completely upending the entire ecosystem. So making sure that we can protect these is part of my job of forcing more transparency. So forcing countries to speak publicly about what they're doing to protect these target populations, because when you get a country that's talking a good game on climate or labor rights or anything, you take them to task on this, and they're completely missing the point. Just as an aside, fish, in a new study out of Rutgers, a group of scientists from Rutgers University, 16% of the ocean's carbon cycle is directly tied to fish in the ocean. And that's not whales, turtle, I mean, that's just fish. 16%. So if we're concerned about taking carbon out of the ocean rather than putting it back in, then we need to be more diligent on how we deal with these target and non-targeted species. So leveraging evolving technology and building cooperation between coastal, flag, and market. So coastal states is obvious, you all understand that. Flag states, certain countries like Liberia, Panama, and others are called flags of convenience. The boat has no relationship to that port or country. However, they flag them for tax reasons generally. And port states to track and prevent illegal fishing. So all of that is somewhat straightforward. In a sense, these are really easy solutions that are going to require a coalition of scores of nations at once to pull off. My exact work will be overseeing contractors in about 10 countries to start, where we are going to simply go down that list of nations that we saw, and we have a group of researchers doing research on what transparency means socially, what is required in X, Y, and Z nation, which politicians in these countries can be leveraged to make this happen. For instance, our group has worked quite a bit with the president of Gabon, and it's not that Gabon is terribly important to this. However, you need to create those champions who can then take this message and run. And so in that creation, we hope to somehow change an entire global paradigm. Well, I hope that wasn't terribly boring, and I hope you got something out of it. If nothing else, I want you to think about the seafood you're eating, because there are important international consequences, and we can do so. We're lucky to have fisheries locally who can tick the box for doing what's right for the world. I mean, not everywhere can say that. So eat as local as possible. And on a serious note, I certainly will take questions if you have them. I just want to thank you for all of the support and kindness you've shown our family over these last 3 years. This has truly been such an incredible honor, and I am forever grateful for this opportunity. So we're handing something. I'm happy to take questions and certainly can be informal otherwise. Yeah.
You used the term ground
Test.
ground
Truthing?
ground truthing. Would you define that for us, please?
Yes. It's a way. It's a way to just check something. So you want to make sure that what you're receiving is in fact accurate, truthful, and so you're able to ground truth something. Sure. Well, champagne is more interesting than fisheries.
Ryan, 60 miles up the coast is Moat Marine. It's
Yeah.
a huge facility.
Of course.
Are we doing any cooperative work with them, or is that in the future?
So we have, and we do, especially on sea turtles, and our marine laboratory has. They are mostly focused on other geographies, but yes, we have a great relationship, especially on the staff level. In some ways, they're much more, not in some ways, in most ways, they're more focused Sarasota up. So we don't always overlap, and they're so much larger that sometimes you can get lost in that shuffle. So I would say keep partnering, but figure out what the niche is there. Yeah. Sure.
I'd like just to reflect for a moment and give our great thanks to you, Ryan, for 3 years of dedicated leadership. It's not easy to follow a founder, effectively a founder in an organization like this. It's not easy to come to work for a staff of 40 people you haven't met in your life and who have been working rather nicely without you. Thank you very much. But you've rallied the troops through some very tough times. COVID, certainly a big challenge, over 2/3 of your time, as you pointed out, and you have mastered the role. And for that, we owe you a great deal of gratitude. We're looking forward to James' leadership, his continuity in the work you have done. I know James will bring fresh perspectives of his own to it, and we hope that we will live up to your expectations of us, and that our organization will continue to do the work that it has been doing for 54 years now, and you'll come around and visit us now and then, and we're pleased to hear you're going to be a donor. So here, Ryan, congratulations to you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for coming tonight.